This is Pastoring in the Digital Parish, your resource and point of connection for building digital ministry strategy and bringing your congregation into the digital age. Have you gotten into virtual reality yet? I attended my first church gathering in VR, and it was pretty wild. It began with a message in the group's normal meeting space, virtual meeting space, and then we ported over to a recreation of the tabernacle from the time of the Exodus. It was quite surreal. What other possibilities exist beyond the virtual church service? Well, this episode is an intro to virtual reality, exploring how VR is changing our world and the ways that we relate, as well as exploring a few of the pros and cons of virtual reality church. Our adjunct professor in this session is Barabara Carneiro. She's going to share her story of getting into church, actually, and then getting started in VR, and getting started then in virtual reality church. Barabara Carneiro is a mentor and a communications director, as well as the owner of a branding agency for churches and Christian ministries. She founded the Accidental Church Communicator, which can be visited at accidentalchurchcommunicator.com. And she's taking part in leading a church communications conference in February of 2023. And that conference is going to be a virtual reality conference. More on that coming up. Let's meet Barabara Carneiro. Barabara, you're branded online as the Accidental Church Communicator. And I love the story because it's so relatable as to how anybody really kind of gets involved in a ministry position. How did you become the Accidental Church Communicator?
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Well, the funny part of it all is that most people, kind of grew up in church and then they kind of stumble upon the communication side of things. And, they have to figure out all of these, like, how do I learn these talents and these skills and learn these tactics?
Mm-hmm.
And, so they kind of come from, most people, I would say, grew up in the church. They understand the church dynamics of things, but now they have to figure out all of this marketing side of things or communication side of things. And for me, it was the opposite. So I've always been in the communication sphere, and suddenly, I came to faith well into my 30s. So for me, it was like, oh, there's a whole culture of what happens in church. And like, I had very little concepts as far as like, wow, these guys have PowerPoint during service. You know what I mean? Like, like simple things that were just so strange to me, having not been raised in the church. But at the same time, I felt like the two of them, like trying to merge, the communication side of things with the church side of things was an experience. And it happened very accidentally. It was one of those like, hey, you do branding for your agency, come help us with some things, or me actually offering like, hey, I kind of want to be a part of what you're doing, and this is what I know to do. So, put me up, coach, kind of thing. And so suddenly you're doing slides, and next thing you know, there's this thing called Pro Presenter that you never heard of before. And you know what I mean? So learning new software, it was very, very, very accidental. And what I found is that many people are in the same boat. So it's not a job that many people kind of like prepare for, and nobody says as a 5-year-old what you want to be when you grow up, and nobody says a church communicator. So
I'm going to be a church communicator. That's great.
A bunch of us are kind of stumbling upon this position in many ways with like this endless, hey, here's another thing that I would hope you can help me with. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you just kind of have a passion for the communications and marketing and branding, and like this is a way of really kind of offering your service to the ministry. Is that how it felt?
Yeah. Yeah, it's my happy place. It's definitely the things that I love doing.
Cool.
But learning how the church operates in that sphere it still is a very entertaining and quite intriguing aspect of what I do. It's kind of easy to communicate when you think of brands and when you think of marketing in general and the marketplace. But then when it comes to churches, there's a whole lot of other questions that come into play. So that's the part that enjoying and exploring right now. Yeah.
Do you find that when you sometimes trot out the word marketing, people kind of jump back from the table? Is there a little bit of...
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. It makes some people itchy. And so I actually do not use the word marketing when it comes to churches as a choice. So we normally use the word church communications. In many ways, it's similar. So there's a lot of overlap into what you do as far as communications and what you do as far as marketing. But just for the sake of like not bringing the word market and marketing to the church, I feel like that can break a few barriers of at least getting the conversation started. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we are very much more comfortable with, I guess, the term communications. And to turn the conversation a little bit, you've got a conference coming up. You're setting it in a very interesting place in virtual reality. That excites me just because of the new possibilities of it. At the same time, I'm a VR noob. Like, I just got my headset a couple weeks ago. All I've done so far is play Beat Saber and like attended one thing in Alt Space VR. You have any recommendations on like what I should check out in VR space?
Yes, I actually have a few. So there is an app where you can go into, much like you would do on a normal computer and look into Google Maps. But the cool thing about it is that you can go back in time. So you can see the same street back in 2015 or 2010 or 2009. And so as far as, whatever their database has for that location, you're able to simply go to the same place. So you're sitting at the corner of what a Google map looks like. So you can see, you can rotate and look around. It's static. It's not, you don't see movement, but you can move and you can then go back in time and see the same street several years ago. That I thought was quite an experience.
Yeah.
It really made me go, it's nostalgic, and you go back to the street where you were living 10 years ago. And,
that's exactly what I thought of. Yeah.
Yeah. And not only that, like, it can be the exact same street, but it did look different back then. And so, that kind of stuff was really nice. And then, I saw a, YouTube concert where you're literally sitting in the center of the concert and they're singing to you, which was quite fascinating. So you're on stage and Bono is right here singing.
Wow.
So that was definitely, and I'll send you the exact apps where you can go and check that out, because for me, it was quite an experience. Another one is called The Key, if I'm not mistaken. It has a kind of a gaming component where you kind of move around and do things, but it talks about the lives of the refugees. And so it starts as more of a story, but it ends up actually talking about a very impactful, real scenario in real life. And so just, I don't know, it's an experience that places you there literally, instead of just me reading on a blog post or, you know what I mean? So several apps that are quite interesting. And if you want to have some fun with literally any kid, any age, well, as long as they can hold the headset, obviously, half and half is the funniest thing.
Okay.
It like, you can't hear people, so everybody sounds like me, 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 me when they talk. But we have like jelly hands, and we look super funny. So each person has a different character. But you can play hide and seek inside the game, or you can, learn how to fly or swim in this huge ocean. And it is a lot of fun, like, and definitely something that I will never experience in real life because I'm afraid of deep water. So
yeah. Yeah. And I'm not too fond of flying. So, I mean, there's a way to jump into that. Well, you're doing a church conference, and first of all, thank you for doing, or a church communicators conference. Thank you for doing that, because, well, I mean, the idea of drawing communicators together, there's just a lot of value in that. But you're setting this particular one in the metaverse. Like, why did you decide that this was the spot to do a church communicators conference?
Yeah, well, I think the question that I ask myself often is why not? But
okay.
yeah, I normally start with the why not. Why why wouldn't we? So I tend to be kind of a risk taker in that sense. But there are several reasons. One was I first got introduced to VR in 2020 when for Christmas my kid asked for a device, and I'm like, whatever the next gaming console, and hey, mommy, I need a Facebook account to connect it with. So I kind of gave him mine. And then I was like, no. This is mine. I'm going to buy you another device, because once I experienced it, it was like, no way. This is yours. It is now mine. So he lost his Christmas gift. I'm not even kidding. Like, sorry, kid. It's connected to my Facebook account. So now you can't, So anyway, it was literally, having come from the Atari Amiga family growing up, like gaming and all of that. It was such a cool, wow, it's here. Like virtual reality is happening and I'm in it. So there was a lot of like thinking of, those, childhood dreams of what gaming would look like in the future. And so, but then there's this other component, like suddenly I'm exercising in the metaverse and, or going through these Google Map, visiting old cities that I've lived in. And I was just so fascinated by the duality of this reality. Like, okay, this is literally like a separate reality altogether, and we get to be there. So little by little, remember, this is still the end of 2020. Half of the world is still in lockdown. And so there's a great need for community. There's a great need for us to come together. Conferences have been stopped for a solid year at this point. And so little by little, the desire to gather people really started to become stronger and stronger in my heart. And I started realizing, wow, there's a lot of events happening in this second reality here. Like there's churches. I ended up in a church somehow one day, didn't even know that was a thing. I was like, oh my God, like some people are actually gathering to talk about Jesus and sing worship songs in the metaverse. And it was a complete accident. Just, everything in my life seems to be accidental these days. But it was literally just like, wow, there are Christians here and they're doing things, So I was very intrigued. First, I realized people can create these gatherings, not just the gaming. Like, when you think of Beat Saber, it's like, okay, somebody created a game, you go in and you play it. Now it was opening a door for things like, oh, I can actually create a room of my own and I can gather with people to do whatever we want to do and talk about whatever we want to talk. And that's kind of how everything got started. Then I realized not many people have devices. And many more don't even know how this thing even works or what the metaverse is.
Yeah.
And so I thought, why not help them? Like, why not, create something that is a very, a less, a more controlled environment for you to understand what the metaverse is with people that you can somewhat trust, instead of just like jumping into, because the reality is there's a lot out there that I wouldn't want people to go see. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As much as you stumble around and find yourself in a church service, there are probably some other noteworthy situations that you find yourself in as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are those churches gathering within the virtual space? Are there specific apps or?
Yeah, so Altspace VR seems to be the one that most people are using, and that's because you can literally start today. You go in, create an account. You have what they call like these templated rooms. So basically, you pick from a series of templates that they already have created. It's a click of a button. The room is ready to go. The only thing you need to do is tell people, here's the code to the room, or make it public so that others can literally type it in and they show up to your room. So there's no development whatsoever. You just click a button and now you have a mini world in the metaverse. Altspace VR makes it easy. It's a free service, so anybody can create it. It's most like it's like a MySpace and virtual reality kind of thing. Okay. You know what I mean? Like we can each have our
language. Got it.
Yeah. So you can each have our own the music. You can pick the music that plays in that room, and then the level of customization comes in because the system itself allows you to add things like pictures on the wall and video players with whatever video you want to have playing, or, piece of furniture. So you can arrange other things to it, but the room itself is ready to go the minute you click that button.
Yeah.
So that allows anybody, not just a church, but anybody to create an event or a room to meet at a fingertip. So, yeah.
Yeah, I got to play with AltSpace the other day. I was attending a church gathering in AltSpace, and the way that it was set up is we gathered in one spot, and we kind of mingled around for a little bit, which can be a little weird for the first time VR user. You learn that there's just like this whole new set of circumstances that in which you relate to one another through that space. But then we had a message, and then we portaled off to experience the Old Testament tabernacle. Which somebody had created within that space, which is pretty extraordinary. I mean, it was.
Yeah. I've been in Noah's Ark, which is quite fascinating as well. It just shows you, kind of like the scale of things in a way that you can never really experience it. Well, nowadays we actually have an actual ark, but you know what I mean? Like there's other things that, until somebody builds it, there's a lot to it that we can't really experience. And so this allows you to experience without any travel, without any expense. It's literally a click of a button, and you're experiencing it in a very immersive way because you're in that place and you have people around you. And so the ability to portal between specific sections always allows for a different type of experience because you don't have to actually walk from one place to the other, but it also allows you to, if things get awkward or strange, literally it's a click of a button and you're out. So in real life, there's this whole it's going to be awkward if I stand up and leave now. In the metaverse, it's not there. It's you just poof, disappear, and nobody's going to wonder what happened. Maybe you just ran out of batteries.
Right. Yeah. We had a number of people who would come in and out, and I was like way late because I was going through the whole process of finding my room and navigating around, and then moving to the next part. So and it just seems natural. Like people are just like it's kind of an in-out space in that regards.
Absolutely. So. And I think that brings freedom to a lot of people because showing up to a church service in real life, you're going to be there for an hour, whether you like it or not.
Right.
And, the ability to kind of peek and see what's going on. And I've been able to peek in a few rooms, not just church related, but other things. And I went to one that was just talking about philosophy. And, it was just this very open place where people are just discussing, what do they believe about things in general. And it's fascinating to hear, and you could tell some people were from other nationalities just because of their accent. It's really interesting to hear kind of how they perceive the world. And these are people that I may never encounter in my lifetime. So now it's opened the possibility for me to if nothing else, just to listen to the questions they're asking and how they're asking those questions. And remember, there's no need for small talk.
Yeah. Okay.
Zero. So you come in and people can openly ask hard questions in spaces like these because they've been designed for that. Now, I've heard, all sorts of people asking all sorts of questions when there's no barrier because now they can click a button and go. Nobody knows who that person was, which might create another type of problems for us because I didn't know who that was, and now I can't connect with them from now on. But there are ways to continue engaging so that you can continue the conversation. But at the same time, I think it's a small price to pay for the amount of openness that we now have access to in the metaverse. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you seen church groups who have started to host, meetups like that?
So there's a couple of churches that are very known in this space that are creating really interesting, they have their whole world created. So the software allows you to have the templated stuff, but then you can create your own world. And that's what we did for the first conference. We used a template for the first conference, and now we have a whole world that is actually a floating island. And so, you can design it the way you want it. So we had it designed in a specific way. We have a campfire, a theater, there's another room, there's an open air, and there's a tree in the middle. not to be symbolic or anything, but there's just a lot of spaces that we've designed having the person that is coming to the conference in mind. And so churches are doing the same thing. They're building rooms for, actually watching a message. There are more the theater style auditorium. And then they have smaller rooms where you can have more intimate conversations. And so I know it's just digital, but you're so immersed that having a smaller setting allows for that type of conversation. The other piece is in the metaverse, we have what we call, proximity chat. So that means the closer I am to somebody, I can hear them. And if I step away, just like in real life, I won't hear them anymore. And so that's something that Zoom cannot do for us, right? So you either hear the whole thing or you're disconnected and you're out. So in this idea of proximity chat or conversation, it gives us a sense of a real life experience because our senses are telling me I'm closer and I'm further away. And proximity basically, it's immediately giving my brain the idea of more intimacy with whatever's going around me. So that's what we're trying to do is at the conference as well, creating separate spaces for more conversations and then a bigger auditorium for presentations. Yeah. Well,
I think that's important because in church world, we often talk about when we meet virtually, when we meet online through, say, an app like Zoom, we miss those kind of quote unquote parking lot conversations, right? Yeah. And this gives an opportunity to really engage in those because you can just kind of pull aside or go off to someplace else, so to speak, move away from the crowd and have that conversation. And I found that happening in the church service that I attended. I'm a little ashamed to admit that, like, sometimes I would just kind of wander by to see in a fishbowl kind of way of like, is this what's going on here? That people very much so. It was, people having just more one-on-one kind of conversations or catching up with somebody that they knew offline that, didn't feel like, the whole group doesn't need to hear all this. So,
Absolutely.
So it's just this fascinating way of opening up, I think, a deeper invitation to relationship than we might have through something like Zoom, where
absolutely, And people may feel like, the metaverse is separating us and dividing. And the reality is, I think it's doing something different. I think it's actually bringing people a little bit closer with less of, there are some levels of intimidation that are different, in my opinion, because if you're in a room with just one other person, it's just like it is in real life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There is that little bit of awkwardness, but it's no different than real life. And so I love the ability, like you're saying, to just be hey, I just want to be a fly on the wall. Well, now you can. Mm-hmm. You can be a fly on the wall on all sorts of different conversations on every single topic you can think of that you wouldn't be able to do in real life. And so nothing is more important for our churches than to listen and to see, because our bubbles are very isolated, right? We have this siloed approach, whether we want it or not. I'm not saying intentionally we're doing so, but imagine what it would be for you to be able to listen to what a 14, 15, 16-year-old is saying when he goes to a philosophy room. What are the questions that they're asking? Because those rooms are there and these kids are there asking those questions. And not just kids. Adults are doing the same thing. And so you can create a room with any topic. Be open-minded. You know that anybody and everybody can show up. I've been to a karaoke room that I thought, oh man, this is going to be a disaster. Imagine in virtual reality and people are singing. And I got there, Ryan, I was just so amazed. I don't know if I got lucky that day, but everybody knew how to sing. And I don't know if it must have been like a group of singers and they got together and I just got to go in and listen. I was like, oh my goodness. It was like goosebumps the whole time. Like just so amazing. I was like, I think I got lucky. I don't think this is how it's supposed to be every time. Karaoke nights tend to be very, so eventually there's a journalist writing a story on a similar topic. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to guide you through the metaverse, but we're actually going to go in. So, we were in the metaverse together showing him around. And I said, hey, there's a room where people can sing. It's a different room. Let's go and check it out. And it was awful. And so, but you know what's interesting?
It was like the local bar karaoke in that.
It was definitely bad. But you know what's interesting though, and we both noticed that one of the kids singing was a kid. We could tell by his, and his song was all about suicide and being sad. And I'm thinking, he's not just singing his song. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's something else happening here for this person to come on a public stage to pick this song to sing. And that's the kind of stuff that we can kind of be a fly on the wall to, because I have the opportunity to speak to that person without having anything to lose after. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
So,
yeah. They don't know anything about, who you are. And,
goes both ways.
Right.
You don't have to tell them you're a pastor.
Yeah. So we have this tremendous listening opportunity as the church being present in metaverse land, I guess, so to speak. Are there some other opportunities that you see maybe other groups embracing that the church could use to embrace as well?
Yeah, I do believe there's a whole generation that will never set foot in a church building. And so, where are they hanging out? I'm not saying it's replacing. One thing is replacing the other. But if we have an opportunity to be present, and I'm not even saying every church needs to be present in the metaverse, but I do believe that some churches have been specifically called to embrace this channel as a channel, because let's be honest, everybody was forced to embrace live stream and be on Facebook Live and on YouTube Lives. Like, we don't see that as out of the ordinary these days, simply because we kind of all followed along. So the same is true for this channel. It's a channel like any other. I think the biggest difference is, and I'm going to get a little bit nerdy on you right now, but when you think of the generations, when you think of the different generations, each generation perceives the world in a different way, because the world was different when they were growing up. And so our childhood determines a lot of the values and the things, how we assign worth to something based on how we were raised. And, even though we may have different ways that we were raised, we were all living in a world that was the same at the same time. And so one thing that we see, for example, from when the millennials were growing up, think about it, in their teenage years, there's internet now and there's social media. And so what happens from a sense of time is that now everything can be asynchronous, right? Before, it's like, I call it and you answer and we are on the phone at the same time, right? Now it's like, I text you and you can get back to me immediately. So there's the immediacy side of things, but also you can get back to me 30 minutes from now or tomorrow, right? The conversation keeps going in an asynchronous way. And so that was the main time change that happened during the millennials as a generation. With Gen Zs, which is the generation that is now in their early 20s, what's happening is there's a whole parallel world that runs at the same time as our world. And so imagine that, like what's happening in the metaverse is not asynchronous. It's happening at the same time as what's happening right now in our life. And the difference is these kids live in the metaverse. Real life is a chore. Yeah. So real life is just the things you have to do. It's like, okay, I have to go to school. I have to eat. My life happens right here. And so the Roblox, all of these other games, they're all operating in the metaverse. If I don't join the game at 3 p.m., my friends will not be there later. You know what I mean? So it's like, as far as time, it's happening in parallel. But the difference is that's real life for them.
Yeah.
Online version of time. So eventually we're going to have to get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
to embrace that as valid relationship. I think that's the biggest barrier that we're encountering in our mindset within the church is the assumption that the only way that we form a true relationship is, when we sit down to coffee together or whatever it is,
exactly.
Being in that space. And
yeah. And one
being
more
the parent of a teenager.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Being the parent of a teenager, and that's a lesson that I've had to learn is, my son has these relationships that exist primarily in, as you said, in metaverse, in virtual space, that that he views as, this is a deep friendship.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what you need to remember, and this is for all of us, is that when they look at those relationships, I don't know if you remember this. I'm from a gaming family where if my mom were to say, it's time for dinner, you pause the game and you go. Like, you just go, right? Well, that doesn't apply nowadays because it's socially disrespectful for you to disappear in the middle of your game when you are in a group. And so there is a sense that there are social rules. There are relationship kind of like, etiquette that exists online that is very strong compared to what we used to experience online a few years ago. So you can't pause the game. You're going to let your group down. You may all die if I disappear. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there's a sense of like, so I had to learn that with my kids, that I had to at least tell them, hey, reach a stopping point. Dinner's going to be ready soon. And that's for the sake of respecting the relationships that they are forming online, because for them, that's what really matters. And so we got to understand that there's a code of ethics, to put it that way, that operates online that we may not, we may think it's just a game, and it's way beyond that.
Yeah, Barbara, I committed that dad faux pas a couple of years ago where I was trying to get him to go someplace and he was gaming and I was frustrated. So I walked in and I just turned off the console. And it got very emotional at that point.
Yeah. But it's like your parent
say goodbye.
Right. It's like your parent grabbing you, like you're at the coffee shop and your parent grabs you and puts you in the car like a few years ago. It's like, that would be awful. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, in looking back into the metaverse, what are some specific tools or resources that might help church leaders take their first steps?
Yeah. Well, I would say a safe place to explore is Outspace VR. Without going anywhere, you can create your own world. And by the way, you do not need a device, like a virtual reality device, to explore it. So they have a 2D version of it. That means you can go on your computer, create an account, explore these worlds. You just don't have the immersive experience, but you can still kind of check it out and visit rooms and actually create your own. So it's a less invasive experience. Just like the world, everything is out there. It's just like the internet, right? So you're going to find the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, but you have the opportunity to experience it in a way that is safe. So I would say Outspace VR is a safe space right now to go in, explore, create your world, and just see what it looks like before you even get a device later on. There are churches, if you just search for VR churches, there are several churches that have VR campuses or churches that just exist in VR. And so you can start with that because you're going to find a safe place to at least observe, ask questions, see what they're doing. And obviously the conference, like, unless you're not in communications, that's going to be very boring for you. It's free, so you can just come in and kind of observe, awesome. how that works in real life or in alternative life. I don't know.
Well, you've built yourself as a serial entrepreneur, so your digital footprint is fairly wide or broad or long or deep or whatever. Where for this audience, where might be a good spot to connect with you online and see what you're up to?
Yes. So the churchcommunicatorconference.com is probably the easiest. That way you can see everything and sign up for the conference if you're interested. But I'm also mostly on Facebook. So just look for my name and you're going to find me there. I'm very good at responding to direct messages. So it's just easier to connect with me that way. Through the agency is where you're going to find my email. It's barbara@wordrevolution.com. It's word, not world. Some people get it wrong. So wordrevolution.com. And so, my day job, if you want to put it that way, is a communications agency and branding for churches. So that's kind of where the Word Revolution brand is. But on the metaverse side of things, we're at the churchcommunicatorconference.com. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. And when is that metaverse conference?
It's coming in February 14. And so you can just sign up. You will receive all of the notifications, instructions on how to attend. You do not need a device, but it is way better if you do. We used to have packages where we actually shipped several devices to people that bought tickets for the previous one. And that was fun, just shipping headsets around. But I actually still have 3. So I have a few that I might be able to sell with a few tickets. But if you don't have one, you can still participate and at least experience, the conference itself and see what it looks like.
Yeah, very cool. Well, it's been a pleasure meeting with you in this virtual space. I look forward to crossing paths with you in the alt space realm as well. Barbara, thanks so much for joining us.
Same here, Ryan. Thank you for having me.
If you want to check out more episodes of Pastoring in the Digital Parish, a good follow-up to this episode might be the Church in the Age of Innovation with Andrew Root. And I feel like youth ministry in the digital parish might be relevant here too. Anyways, listening more actually helps bump up the visibility of the podcast, so keep it up. Again, my name is Ryan Dunn. I'd like to thank resourceumc.org, the online destination for leaders throughout the United Methodist Church. They make this podcast possible. And of course, they host our website, pastoringinthedigitalparish.com, where you can find more online resources for ministry. If you want to connect, check out our Pastoring in the Digital Parish group on Facebook. You can also send me questions and ideas for future sessions at digitalparish@umcom.org. Another session comes next week. In the meantime, peace to you.